Good evening. My name is Judge James Hosmer, and I am going to tell you the story about how I became Beaver Dam's first judge. I was born in May 29th of 1822 in Cleveland, Ohio, and eventually made my way to Wisconsin as a 22-year-old man in 1842. At that time, I came to Wisconsin because I wanted to study law, and went to the University of Wisconsin in Madison to study law, and spent a couple of years there before moving to Milwaukee to begin practice, and also started a harness making business in Milwaukee as well. Around 1846, I decided to move to the bustling town of Beaver Dam, Wisconsin, which contained about 50 people at that time in 1846. But I knew that being in the old Northwest Territory, that this was an opportunity for a town to grow and for people that needed not only harnesses for their horses and oxen, but also a lawyer in the area. By the time Beaver Dam was incorporated in 1856, I was elected 3rd Ward Alderman and also served as a street commissioner at that time. And by the time 1864 rolls around, I was elected Beaver Dam's first judicial judge in this area. Now, Beaver Dam was not part of the state of Wisconsin, obviously, until 1848, when Wisconsin became a state. And at that time, Beaver Dam was growing by leaps and bounds, with many German and other types of immigrants coming into the county. So there was a real need for law and order in the area. By 1864, I was also elected mayor of Beaver Dam for the first time, and again in 1875. I ran my harness shop for only about 10 years, and continued to practice law for over 40 years in the city of Beaver Dam up until the time of my death in 1892. Buried next to me here in the cemetery is my wife, Uretta, and some of our 7 children. And that's how I became the mayor of Beaver Dam.
Good evening. I'm Abraham Ackerman, and a lot of people don't even know who I was or what I actually did, but I played a very important role in coming to Beaver Dam. The first thing is people always say, well, how did early settlers even find out about this area? And part of it was because back at that time in New York, and we lived in upstate New York, and at the time there were land speculators who had newspapers, magazine, flyers, and they were out east trying to convince people to buy land out in the western part of the United States, especially when they opened the Midwestern states like Michigan and Wisconsin and Indiana and Ohio and Illinois. So we ended up then coming to first Lake Emily. We came from Milwaukee had to walk and put our belongings in a wagon and then end up settling in Lake Emily. But we really didn't really like it there, and we heard about Beaver Dam and the possibility of even creating a dam there. So I ended up buying property, and it was only $1.25 an acre at that time. So I bought a pretty big part of Beaver Dam around the Whalen Academy area, where the old fairgrounds was, where the Whalen Fieldhouse is today, around Swan Park, and actually going west from Swan Park all the way to the river. So we got here and we lived in Lake Emily for just a short time, and then we had Thomas Mackey build a block house that we lived in again for a short time, but it was a very safe and comfortable place to live for a short time. And also I convinced a friend of mine, Henry Schultz, to come here, and he was Beaver Dam's first blacksmith. So what happened then is I owned this property, and I thought, well, how are we going to make money? We had some money from New York, and we had friends back in New York State that had money that we could borrow it from, but we decided to build a sawmill. So we created the second dam, which is where Kraft is today. So that was the second dam, sawmill, ran for 24 hours a day because of all the people that were coming to the Beaver Dam area, and so we got to make some money off of that. But then we also felt it was important, and I did especially, that people should have a good education and a good religious background. So I actually donated the land that Whalen Academy was built on, and even planted some of the big oak trees that are there still today.
Well, my name is Hannah Ackerman, and I think you probably just heard from my husband, Abraham, how successful he was and how much he contributed to the city of Beaver Dam. However, I think the ladies in the audience know that behind every successful man, there's a woman who probably prompts him and helps him. And I consider that I did that for my husband. Let me tell you a little bit about the history of our family and coming here to what is now Beaver Dam. In 1841, my husband and I are 8 children, yes, 8 of them. We settled on the shores of Lake Emily, a beautiful, beautiful little spot. It was very nice. We were very happy there. But then it was summer, and it was hot, and it was humid, and there were mosquitoes. And then winter came, and we were in this hut with cracks, and the wind blew through, and it was cold, and I said, "You cannot be serious. We can't live here." So my husband, with a friend, Thomas Mackey, they scouted the area, and the family, my husband and I and 8 children, went overland 10 miles south to what would become Beaver Dam. We were some of the first 5 settlers who came here. Thomas Mackey built us a home, more of a block house, and we lived there for a while with our 8 children. And finally then we built a home right a couple places to the east in the house that actually it still stands there. It's on the corner of Mill and University on that northeast corner. In 1845, personal tragedy struck our family. We lost 3 of our children. 3 children died within 3 months. In fact, as I sit here, their graves are here. Our youngest, Edgar was only 9 months old. That's his plot back there. It used to have a little lamb. The head has worn off. So the loss of 3 of our 8 children in such a short period of time sort of squelched the dreams of my husband. But we still had 5 children, and we carried on. And in 1848, in this new home, the dreamer in my husband was revitalized. The home is still there, as I said. It's on the, actually if you're in Swan City Park, it's the northeast corner there, right across the street. And as I said, our home still stands there. My husband was a great man. He did a lot to contribute to Beaver Dam. He was a generous man. Our first block home that we lived in, we allowed people to live there, families to live there for free. He lent people money. He gave people money. He dreamed of a community with good education, with church, with beautiful parks. He planted trees. In fact, 2 of his oak trees still stand today on the property of Wayland Academy. Yes, he was a great man. He did a lot of wonderful things, but I take a little credit for that because perhaps you remember I said to him way back when, "You cannot be serious." So we moved on, we came here, and that's our story.
Oh, good evening. Nice night for a walk, isn't it? So glad that you came. I recognize any of you? I don't think so. After all, I am 248 years old. I was born the year before the United States, so I'm older than the country. My name is Rachel Brower, and Paul and myself, we were from New York and we came to Wisconsin territories with our son Jacob. We came from New York, came down by ship to Green Bay, then down the Fox River to Lake Winnebago. From there we put our belongings, most of our belongings, in a flatboat and shipped that off to Portage by cart. But then we came across Lake Winnebago in Indian canoes. Oh, imagine that. And at that time I was in my 50s, late 50s. But we settled on the north side of Fox Lake. Okay? Well, we really didn't like that, so we moved to the south part of Fox Lake, where we built a sawmill. It was a very successful sawmill. But that Jacob, he wanted to move again. And I think the reason being is that his wife Martha was the sister of Thomas Mackey. And Thomas Mackey was the first person in Beaver Dam. We were the second family. We moved here, and Jacob, our son, he built this double cabin. In fact, some people have told me that there's a plaque there that shows where we had built this cabin. They say it's like downtown, and it's on Front Street. I would go look if I were you. Needless to say, I've not seen it. But anyway, he built this double cabin, and he built a wing for Paul and I. And it was really nice until he decided to make the whole thing into a tavern and a boarding house. Oh, I felt so sorry for that poor Martha. I couldn't help her very much because by then I was getting pretty old. And she had to cook and she had to clean, and on top of that she had 7 children. Oh, what a lot of work for her. And then things got worse because our dear Jacob, he died in 1846. He was only 42 years old. He's buried right next to us, right over there. And, well, it was too much for them to handle. And both Martha and her daughter Henrietta, who happened to be the first non-Native American baby born in Beaver Dam, they had to go into a boarding house. Paul and I hung on there for a while. I died when I was 84 years old, and this has been my permanent home ever since. But we Browers are very proud because we were the first family in Fox Lake and the second family in Beaver Dam. I hope you have a good night.
Welcome, I'm Thomas Mackey. So don't you go fussing over me now because I was the first one here, but I certainly wasn't the first one here alone. My sweet daughter Hannah and her son, or her husband, Joe Getchius, came here from New York State. They wanted to go to the Western Territories and make a better life for themselves. So they headed off here, and in New York, the primary crop was rocks. And so when me and my wife Ann found out that they were heading off to Wisconsin territories and taking our little grandbaby, little Johnny, along with them, it was an easy choice for us to go along with them. My sister and the Brower clan were already in Fox Lake, and we joined them there. When we got there, Joe and I headed off down the river and found a nice piece of property and a piece of land, and it was watered by a sweet little spring, and we laid claim to that property in 1841. So we cleared the land, and it's kind of where Food Pride is right now on Spring and Mackey Street, and built our homes with the lumber that we got from the trees that we cut down, and went back to Fox Lake and got the rest of the family and brought them back. And Jacob Brower was so impressed with the claim that we had that he moved here also. Well, my daughter Hannah was scared to death of Indian attacks, and so she'd always lock up the homestead whenever we were gone, and he hid in the corner and wouldn't do anything until anybody got back home and that. But we really never were attacked by Indians at all. But she should have been more scared of the sickness, there being no doctors. So our sweet little grandchild, little Johnny, he only lasted a year here, and died at the age of 2, and he was the first one buried in this cemetery in 1842. And I'm not sure where his great aunt is, but he is buried next to his great aunt Rachel Brower here, and his dad Joe joined him in 1846, 4 years later. I stuck around until quite a few years later, and enjoyed watching the city grow and be prosperous, and it makes the body proud. It surely does. It makes us proud. So that's my little story about Thomas Mackey.
Hello, I'm Elva Burgess, and I was a private in the famous 5th Regiment D Company, Wisconsin Infantry Volunteers. I volunteered when I was 18 years old. That was August of 1862. We got sent down to Virginia to fight the rebels during the Civil War. And let me tell you, they sure did try hard to kill me. In fact, I managed to survive being shot 5 different times. The first one was at Rappahannock Station, Virginia in September of 1863. They took me in the right side with a rifle bullet. A month later, I sent home my Indian rubber blanket. That's sort of a rain poncho. It had 29 different bullet holes in it. I bet my mama wasn't happy about that, but she managed to mend it back up and ship it back to me. I kept on fighting. May 10th of 1864 at Spotsylvania, Virginia, I got shot in the top of the head. They stitched me up and sent me back out. 2 days later of that same war, that same battle, I got shot in the left arm, paralyzing it. That's why I got this here sling. A month later at Petersburg, I got shot in the left leg. They stitched me up and give me this here crutch, sent me back out. Later on that day, I got shot in the groin. Not a good one. Next year, 1865, in April, the rebels surrendered and the Civil War was over. In June, they sent me home, back up here to Beaver Dam. I lived out my last few years in a lot of pain, and I developed some asthma. I died April 19th of 1871, and this is my final resting spot. Thank you.
Hello, I'm sure you don't know me, so let me introduce myself, seeing that my stone is gone. My name is Mary Bristol Goodman, and I was the daughter of Reverend Moses Ordway. My father dragged me into the wilds of Wisconsin Territory when I was only 9. After founding the first Presbyterian churches in Green Bay and Milwaukee, we finally ended up in Beaver Dam, where Pa gave my 16-year-old brother David a shovel and wheelbarrow and showed him where to build a dam. And then rode off on his circuit, founding Presbyterian churches in all the surrounding villages. I got to keep the house. Lucky me. Mr. Bristol arrived in Beaver Dam in 1842 as the town's first attorney. Yale educated, he impressed me with his wit and intelligence. Being female, I couldn't go to law school like my brother David, or any other school for that matter, although I was just as smart. How unfair that was. I figured I'd have more opportunities to stretch my mind with Mr. Bristol than with a fiery Presbyterian preacher of a father. So in 1846, at the tender age of 17, we were married. Beware the idealism of youth. 2 years later, he was struck with gold fever and abandoned me and our little boy for the gold mines of California, where he was promptly killed by mountain fever. Guess the man wasn't so smart after all. He'd gone west with Dr. Ezra Voigt and Marietta, Ezra's new wife. Ezra made money at the gold mines and came back to Beaver Dam to establish its first drugstore, helped to build the cotton mill, was the maker of famous Voigt's golden leaf flour, and started a licensed oil project. He and Mr. Spaulding built the oil mill near the third dam in 1853. He rented land from the area farmers and planted flax, and was able to press 30 to 40 gallons of oil a day from 20 bushels of flaxseed. They kept running out of flaxseed and closed after 2 years. I married Noah Goodman, a good man, in 1855, and we had 6 children, of whom 2 survived. Us women were often discounted by history, but we toiled as much and risked so much more by coming here to Wisconsin. Imagine all the Mrs. Rembrandts, and Millie Michelangelos, and Joanne Bachs, and Anne Shakespeares that never had opportunity to express their talents. Oh, if only. Imagine what could have been.
Hi everybody and welcome. Welcome, we're glad to have you here. I can't welcome you like I would have years ago when my husband and I owned the hotel. He was a good man. I was his second wife. So I didn't have to do all the work of calming him down. His first wife did, and that's great. He was a good man. And we had a hotel called the Stevenson. That was our last name. It was on the site of the current museum. Isn't that amazing all these years later? When he bought it, he decided it could be bigger. So he added on additional rooms, and we had a thriving business. I miss him and I miss our people. It was fun to hear him saying, I got to have parties all the time. I did a lot of cleaning and I did a lot of cooking. But we could have parties and welcome people. Those days are gone. You know, there were lots of hotels in this area and lots of road places to stop, and sometimes people wonder why. They weren't that far apart, maybe 5 or 10 miles. They were all over. But when you watch a movie or see a play or read a book, everybody came west with horses pulling the covered wagons. It's not what it was. It was oxen. Big, heavy oxen. They could pull everything you owned in the wagon. And when you got to the land that was yours, your new title, they could plow that virgin land. They had the strength to do it. But oxen aren't fast. They moved at about the speed of 5+ miles a day, and the seats had no springs, so you bounced around. And the roads, let me tell you about the roads. They were ruts, 2 ruts on either side, so you were pretty stiff. Now, the speed that they went, you could walk at that speed, and it was actually more comfortable walking than it was to ride out here. You see signs going to Fond du Lac about Military Road. That's where people went following along so that they could visit the rest homes, the rest of it, as they worked their way north and further to the west. Most of those places are gone now. 1840s was a long time ago. But we still have one here in Beaver Dam. Did you know that? Yeah, we do. And we still have one here. If I give you a hint, maybe you can figure out what it is. You have to go Vault County trunk. E. Pick up A.